I did my project on the movie A Quiet Place, filmed 2018. It takes place in the year 2020. A family who has a daughter who has a cochlear implant must live in silence to avoid these monsters that come and hunt down anything that makes a noise. It makes it more interesting. The mom's pregnant, and they've been doing research, but these creatures seem impossible to stop. The main daughter character in the film, Regan Abbott, is played by a teen actress, Millicent Simmons, who also is deaf and has a cochlear implant. Her portrayal is really shown through the use of sign language and the use of the cochlear implant. And she has a lot of difficulty with verbal instruction because she can't hear. It's also important to note about deaf culture. Many individuals who are deaf are a part of a community called the deaf community with a capital D. It's really its own culture with language and books and values. And it's important to note they don't see themselves as disabled. So as part of the deaf community, this film does a good job trying to really bring the strength of what deaf people can do, even in a survival apocalyptic situation. Although throughout the film, the stigmas are still relevant. In the readings, we talked about people with disabilities are a menace to others. This is shown when near the beginning, when the daughter, Reagan, gives her little brother a toy that makes noise and it ends up getting him killed. And the father ends up never saying he loves her for years afterwards. And that creates some more emotional issues for her and probably mental ones as well. Which leads to the burden of disabilities as unending. She has to kind of carry the weight of her brother's death and her dad's lack of love for years. The disabilities need to be cared for. That she's under strict watch, although not always super strict, from her parents because they don't trust her because she can't hear to make sure they can be safe. But at the end, Longmore talks about at the end of his paper that the programs reflect growing social political perception of people. And I think this film does a really good job, as most of the film is done throughout with sign language and done with no music. And it is somewhat deaf centric. However, it portrays silence as more of a tragedy. The couple in the film can only seem to have a romantic moment when they're listening to a song on an iPod. They can't seem to express emotions of love and compassion through other means that's not verbal. They have to often go to a waterfall to have a conversation about love and compassion, and the daughter's never invited to those trips. What's scary for those that can hear may not be those that are deaf. There's lots of jump scares in this movie, and they use silence to build suspense, and that just doesn't work and translate always into the deaf community. So it's interesting as a movie that's supposed to kind of invite both cultures in to have that more prevalent horror side be for the hearing folk. In the end of the movie, technology is the hero, not the person that's deaf. The cochlear implant saves the day, and not the person. I think that's really important to note. But overall, the movie is a good bridge between cultures, and I think it can be enjoyed by both equally, just probably for some different reasons. But the film is probably one of the first films that's really as deaf-centric in the mainstream. And I think that's pretty awesome. There's a lot of beauty and strategy in ASL. I personally like to use sign language a lot in my classroom to communicate, whether you got your mouth full or you're across your classroom or it's noisy. There's lots of strategies and good use among hearing cultures and communities to use sign language. But the biggest point is it's another bridge into the deaf community and culture where we can communicate, because that's kind of the origin of really society right there, is being able to communicate and work together. This film shows a lot about family struggles with deafness and how hard it is for a family to maybe take up when they find out a child's deaf and whatnot. It often, most deaf kids have hearing parents, so it becomes an interesting challenge in the family. This film also shows the importance of how to treat others as useful and how to express love, as the parents do a pretty poor job of that, and it leads to a lot of the complications probably could have been avoided if we just loved each other and were able to figure out ways we can make each other useful for the family in a survival situation. Here are some references that I noted for the use of this project. I hope you enjoyed, and I do recommend this movie. If you like sci-fi,